You're listening to the Becoming More Me podcast with me, Theresa Lear Levine. You're already enough. But if you're anything like me, you thrive when you're stretching and developing yourself, creating more of the person you feel called to be. This podcast is here to inspire and support you. Let's release the negative, reinforce the positive, and elevate our vibe together as we tap into our limitless potential to transform and grow. Hey, thanks for tuning in today. I'm feeling celebratory today because after many weeks of sickness, whether it be mine, my kids, my husband, just fatigue or some kind of an ailment, or I had that, double eye infection, everybody is feeling pretty good today. And all of my kids went to school. That alone is like, do the happy dance worthy. So I'm feeling really good about that. And just, because it can be so different and it can be a different kind of challenge when they're home. I am blessed and grateful that I get to do my work from home, but that doesn't mean that it's easy to do work while kids are homesick. It really means, and this is something that I've been trying to do, not even because the kids were sick, but just in the past year or two, is really being able to have a schedule where I can bump things around. Because when you have 4 kids and you have a couple businesses and you have a robust life, sometimes when you think you're going to do something is not when it's going to be done. And sometimes when you plan to do something and you get to that time that it's on your calendar, it doesn't feel like the right time to do it. Now, there's a lot of reasons for that. Some of that can be resistance, and you just need to work through it. But sometimes, in the case of my ADHD brain, I know when I can focus in and do really deep work. And I know when it's better to go for a walk or go do the laundry or play with my kids or cook a meal or do something else. There are just certain modes, it seems like, of my brain functioning. And when I have the flexibility to utilize them for what is most aligned with myself at that time, I get so much more done, and I'm able to stay in the vortex and feel good and enjoy myself and be productive and not even think about any of it as work. Whereas if I was forcing myself to do something because it was on my calendar at a certain time, but it wasn't something that actually had to be done in that segmented time on my calendar, forcing myself never really feels good. And when it doesn't feel good, you don't do good. And it's a domino effect, and it's not good. So whenever you can arrange things, and I'm not saying avoid tasks, I'm just saying maybe, you plan to sit down and do some really intense thought work or writing or something like that at 1:00, but instead you're really tired then and you're not feeling really on. Maybe you need to go meditate for 15 minutes or, take a brisk walk to pick yourself up or do something to kind of get your brain stimulated again. And then it'll be so much easier to do it. And if we don't punish ourselves through our day and force ourselves through things, it's so much easier to get things done. It feels good. It's enjoyable. The only time we have is right now. And if we're not enjoying what we're doing right now, or finding a way to make it enjoyable because we got to do it anyway, that kind of stinks, right? So I wanted to talk today about a bit about ADHD, I guess, and how that corresponds with getting things done and our emotions and the ways that we can work on things and elevate our consciousness and show up differently, all that good stuff. That's all my jam normally, right? So if you don't know what EFT tapping is, then listen to some more of my podcasts or watch some more of my YouTube videos. I won't have a whole lot of time to go into that because I've explained it so many other times before in other areas. But for those of you who are unfamiliar, EFT tapping is done with our fingers on specific meridian points on our body, specifically 9 of them. And they're these ancient acupressure points that we've known about for thousands of years. We have them on our face, we have them on our body, we have them on our hands. And when we utilize them, we can relax our sympathetic nervous system and also our fight or flight mode. We can get calmer, we can get clearer, we can get more rational. And when we combine that with modern psychology, which is the whole culmination of EFT, we get to release the emotions or effects of a certain problem or worry or challenge that's happening in our life. It works really fast. It's extremely effective. And at the heart of it, it's all about compassion and love and acceptance and forgiveness. And it's amazing for busy minds like those of someone who has ADHD. And of course, there's a bunch of other uses for EFT. You can literally use EFT on anything that you can feel, physical or emotional, past, present, future paced. And that would include things like traumas, PTSD, anxiety, stress, anger, resentments, bothersome memories, phobias, fears, chronic pain, autoimmune conditions, you name it. Sky's the limit. And it has shown to be effective on all of those things. But today I just want to really hone in on the ADHD aspect because I'm asked to talk about that a lot. And it's part of my human experience and my personal experience. So, I'm not a doctor or anybody that's a specialist in ADHD, but I've lived it. I have children with it. I have a lot of clients with it, and I have a lot of experience seeing how it shows up. So a lot of times with ADHD, it can come with other things also, or they can come as a result of it. For instance, it's really common for ADHD and anxiety to seem to go hand in hand, or high functioning anxiety. And I've talked about that on other episodes as well. So if you're not familiar with that, definitely queue up a previous episode of Becoming More Me, where I talk about high functioning anxiety and see if you kind of meet that criteria or not. It's a great thing to understand better. But ADHD and anxiety are two separate conditions, but sometimes the anxiety can come seemingly as a result of the ADHD, and it can make certain symptoms of ADHD worse. For instance, feeling restless, difficulty concentrating can be made worse when you also have anxiety. So anxiety also has its own symptoms. So, things like that, constant worry, edginess, stress, fatigue, difficulty sleeping, those can all be part of anxiety. And sometimes people have a little trouble telling one from the other, but it's with anxiety disorder, you'll have a lot more worry about a wider range of things, not just the things that are coming as a result of your ADHD. And, doctors can be great at helping you sort that out if you are having trouble figuring out the difference. Now, my focus with ADHD today is adult ADHD. And for that, there's a lot of symptoms that typically present themselves. So some of those would be impulsiveness, emotional dysregulation, disorganization, difficulty prioritizing things, time management issues, poor time management mainly, focus issues, trouble multitasking, although I hate saying that because I feel like everybody has trouble multitasking because we're not intended to multitask. So sometimes I feel like that's just putting an extra burden on people with ADHD to feel like they're supposed to be able to do something that's really not beneficial for any of us. But still, it's considered a common symptom. Sometimes there's trouble with planning. Sometimes there is excessive activity or restlessness in the form of that H, that hyperactivity. Now, I've also done another entire podcast on the H in ADHD and all the ways that that shows up. So if that's something you're unfamiliar with or you think is only a physical symptom, definitely check out that episode because there's a lot more on how that H can show up mentally, not just physically. can have a really low tolerance for things that frustrate or irritate us. And that kind of goes hand in hand with the emotional dysregulation, mood swings, trouble finishing things, start a lot of things, but don't finish them. Tempers can be hotter with people that have ADHD, and the ability to cope with stress can sometimes be troublesome. Now, EFT can definitely help people that have high functioning anxiety or general anxiety and ADHD. For me, here's some ways that it helps me. So I definitely have impulsiveness. And when I implement EFT, I get to calm down. I get to slow down my thoughts, which are normally coming in faster than I even know how to manage them. I sleep better and I'm more present. Presence is so important. All we have is now. And it really calms that H in ADHD through the nervous system regulation that it provides. Low frustration tolerance is definitely another one that I struggle with. So for me, utilizing EFT puts me into a better perspective of love, acceptance, forgiveness. It allows me to meet myself where I am and to move on from there. And the perspective shifts can really, really be valuable. And, you know, when you have high functioning anxiety, there's that tendency to want to be an overachiever and to have really high standards. And so sometimes it can appear like people that have high functioning anxiety are just like really like they're killing it and they're getting stuff done. And it can seem to be propelling them. Sometimes it is. But I know that for me, before I started using EFT, before I was able to elevate my consciousness and really kind of see the bigger picture more often, it may have appeared like things were going well. And during that time also, it was really like I was in the mode of like working on my goals, not really like enjoying the journey. And when we work on goals, there's always resistance. It's a fight, and it does not actually align very well with law of attraction and actually creating what we want, because it creates a lot of resistance. And in my case, the cost for that was really high. Like it was me feeling exhausted and drained and just no inner peace and not much presence. And along with that, spending a lot of time in self-judgment and a lot of time criticizing myself and really being hard on myself. So I would take on way too much. And then it was like do or die with the to-do list. And yeah, it was not much fun because I wouldn't let myself slow down, enjoy what I was up to, pause, relax, rejuvenate, recharge, none of that. So even though, sure, I was getting some pretty awesome stuff done, I was making some pretty big things happen in my life, the outcomes weren't fulfilling because they didn't align with my values and they didn't feel good. So it's like chasing the carrot or like thinking that you have someplace to go instead of realizing that you're already exactly where you need to be, that everything's already here. You just have to align with it. And I definitely was not aligning with it. So learning to slow down and utilizing EFT to bring myself into appreciation and gratitude and intention and joy, well, that just allowed more and more great stuff to happen instead of the push, push, strive, hustle, hustle. It's all resistance. It wasn't getting me anywhere, not anywhere that felt good, at least. So, I've said it before. It's like I wanted calm, confident clarity. And instead, I got confusion and cortisol spikes and chaos. And it took me a little while to realize that I was perpetuating this cycle and that I was also completely empowered and capable to stop it. So, yeah, what you focus on, you create. The things you do become habits. The neural pathways can get some pretty deep grooves going on. And what happens then is that our nervous system ends up feeling safer in the upheaval, safer in the chaos, instead of in the peace and the alignment and the abundance that we're striving for instead of aligning with. So those are just some personal examples for me. And your struggles may be different. They may be similar. Who knows? But just know that even if you have all of the symptoms of high functioning anxiety, or people see you and they're like, oh man, she's really got it all together, that there may be some deeper struggles going on that you may or may not be aware of, and certainly that others are probably not aware of because you're probably masking it really well. So I want to talk now about emotional dysregulation, because that is a huge symptom. It's a core symptom of ADHD. And if you're unfamiliar with what that is, it means that for somebody that has an ADHD brain, it may be more likely that when a small setback or challenge happens, they have a really overblown reaction. And there's actually all of this science and brain chemistry behind the feelings that seem to be kind of like a runaway train, because people with ADHD feel emotions in a more intense way than people that don't have ADHD. And a lot of people will say that the emotional dysregulation, the temper, the overreacting, all that kind of stuff can be their most difficult symptom to manage. And that's what I am probably the most thankful to have EFT to help me with, because it can really, really settle things down so much faster and get you the perspective shift needed to be able to show up in a different way. So let's just say, for people with ADHD, like you could be working, whether you work from home or in an office or whatever, maybe you're walking from one room to another and you got a big stack of papers that you've been working on and you drop them. And you could literally feel like having a tantrum like you were 3 years old. And maybe you do, maybe you don't, but it really hits you hard. Or maybe it's time to go somewhere and you can't find your car keys and you just want to or do start screaming, and just, you're not like screaming at anybody in particular. You just kind of have had it and you just are letting that valve open and the emotions are not regulated. So again, blowing things out of proportion, having these extremely emotional reactions to things that for others with non-ADHD brains would just be like minor setback, like they figure it out, it's okay. And the reason for this is because the amygdala, that little part of our brain that handles emotional reaction and decision making, when a flood of like anger or worry or whatever happens, then that sends a signal to the amygdala to tell the cerebral cortex what's going on. And then the cerebral cortex in turn inhibits the emotional response. So for someone without ADHD, that chain of events happens and then they're able to pause or take a deep breath or just take a second and figure it out before they say something they regret, do something they regret, have a tantrum, act out in a way that they regret later, whatever it might be. But for people with ADHD, that connection and that chain is pretty weak. So we can really struggle to have reactions that actually align with what happened. And it can be really hard to calm down once we get upset. And that can come across in a lot of ways. Sometimes it seems like we're out of touch with the people around us, or that we're being insensitive, or that we're immature, or whatever else. But there's just a totally different way that the brain is processing things. And the connection between the prefrontal cortex and our like whole like reward system has less activation. So this is kind of believed to explain negative reactions to delayed gratification. So with like overexcitement and frustration and anger. So yeah, we're not very patient. And being able to regulate emotions and both on the spot, like you can with EFT, you can regulate these emotional imbalances on the spot. Like you're getting ready to have that tantrum and you either catch yourself right then and there and you do a round of EFT, or you have the tantrum and then you do the round of EFT so that you can kind of pop back into the way that you'd rather show up, get back to feeling more like you, and not have it go on indefinitely. So there it's kind of like the Band-Aid application, like the thing's happening, it's already kind of going off the rails, but hey, let me catch myself, do a round of EFT. And the more you get conscious, the more you'll be able to insert that nervous system regulation and emotional freedom techniques before you do the thing that you don't really want to do. But in the beginning, it might be like, hey, I just had this tantrum and now I need to get back to me. And then also to be able to do more deep and lasting healing, which is, if the last one was like a Band-Aid, now we're talking about like total like wound clean out, like really getting to the bottom of things and making it so that the next time you lose the keys or you drop the stack of papers or whatever, you don't even, everything's good. You just show up differently because you've done the work. And EFT tapping can shift perspectives and change the way you show up, plain and simple. So yeah, and it really does work. I know people are always like, really? Like you tap on some body parts and you say some stuff and then things change. Yeah, actually, it does work that simply. And I think for that reason, some people discount it because they're like, oh, well, if the really complicated stuff I've tried or the really in-depth therapy I've done or all these decades of talking to a doctor or whatever, none of that's worked. Why is this going to work? And I'm like, gosh, just try it. Like there's no harm that can be done from trying it. And I love the way that it has helped me with certain aspects of my ADHD that felt a lot like they were hindrances for a really long time. And it's awesome for ADHD because, I always wanted to be able to meditate and be able to really like mellow out and get in the vortex and all that kind of stuff. And I couldn't ever do it in the traditional ways. I figured out ways to do it that are more fidgety. And EFT is one of those ways because it's like active meditation. And sometimes I just need to do it so that I can calm down enough to do more traditional meditation. I still don't feel like I'm amazing at it, but that's okay. And I have other ways that I can get the effects that I'm looking for and the results that I'm looking for, the outcomes using this, and it feels good to me. So you find the downstream way to accomplish the thing that you want to do, and then you just go with the flow. There's no need to paddle upstream to do it a different way. If the result's just as good, doing it the way that's easy. And that's how things should be. Really, really should be. And this is a great way to, relieve stress. And you don't have to do a whole lot to do it. And I think that's part of why I was really attracted to it, because I love things that are efficient and effective. I love getting quick results. And that can happen in just a few rounds of tapping. And I definitely was prone to the overthinking and the anxiety and the lack of focus and all the other typical ADHD symptoms. So being able to have a way that I could make a change in an empowered way is really meaningful to me. And I think it's been really meaningful to the people who I've worked with over the years too. It's just every individual situation can be adapted for this. And it can be so helpful for the other things that come up as a result of ADHD too. Things like, and this is not just ADHD, but again, it does go hand in hand too. Procrastination, imposter syndrome, self-worth issues, setting boundaries, physical pain, food cravings, anxiety, limiting self-beliefs, motivation, so much more. But I think, the hand in hand with ADHD, we get a lot of procrastination, a lot of self-worth issues, boundary issues, the self-limiting beliefs, and motivation being a problem for a lot of people that have that. So yeah, and what's kind of funny is that when you're doing EFT, it's very common to have these thoughts come up that just seem like super random or not connected to what you're doing, or just kind of strange. And for me, that's like every day. Like that's just normal. That's happens during regular conversation or work or whatever else. Just kind of what a lot of people, I guess, would be like, squirrel, just those random thoughts. But when you're doing EFT tapping, you just allow them. And they come and they go, and you let them pass, and you can sort through them. You can choose to tap on them. You can choose to let them go. You can address them. And it's really neat because it can seem easier to sort through them when you're tapping. It's like you already know that you hold the answers, and you do. But so often what you're missing is that feeling of empowerment and capability, and the tapping brings that back. So it really does connect you to your inner guidance system, your intuition, and gets you really clear. And man, does that help a busy brain. So I just wanted to give you some science behind the ADHD brain, some reasons why EFT tapping is so effective, and also just encourage you to try it today. It's also interesting that, so it's really good for focus, but a side effect of doing tapping can be feeling sleepy or yawning, or even a little bit of crying, or just that zoned out feeling, which might not seem optimal if what you're doing is trying to get focused. But what's happening there is that those things that happen, the yawns or the sleepiness or whatever, they signify that you have released suppressed emotions. And that can actually lead to an energetic boost and also inner calm, which can be perceived as focus or channeled as focus. So they're not as opposite as they might seem. And as we tap on ADHD, we get to recognize that certain things that we don't really want in our lives, the anxiety, the worry, the fear, we realize what they have taken from us and how much of our life they have taken up. And that learning to tap and regulate the nervous system just really becomes valuable, because up until that point, the anxiety and the stress and the fear and the worry have probably been leaving you mentally drained, physically drained, exhausted. And when you're in that state, it does not take much to throw your nervous system off. That not being able to find the keys, that dropping the stack of papers, whatever it is, will have your nervous system on high alert and just kind of going over the edge. So it's a lot easier when you're not regulating to become burnt out, to become very exhausted and fatigued. So learning to regulate yourself, you find all of this energy that was always yours to begin with, but now you actually get to use it for things that you want to use it for, because you're not leaking energy to all of these undesirable things. So that's just another really cool way that elevating your consciousness gives you back more, gets you more present, and allows you to experience more in your present. It lets off pressure and it restores balance and it allows you to see things differently. And that's a really, really big gift. And I notice with myself and with my clients that when they've gone too long without tapping, like between an appointment or when I just, skip a day or two, I'm definitely more reactive. I'm definitely less patient and have a tendency to lose my cool more easily. And that's not how I want to be. So knowing that this is something that I can easily do means that it's not something that I often skip or go too long without doing. And again, this is totally well suited for ADHD brains because you know what? Be in the shower and doing some tapping. You can be out for a walk doing some tapping. You can be sitting in traffic or waiting to pick your kids up from school or running errands and doing some tapping. And that just makes it a really easy to use tool and a really effective one. So I'll do some more on this later in another episode, maybe work on some things that you would be interested in tapping on. But for now, if any of this resonates with you, try some tapping rounds. I've got tons on YouTube and you know how to find me. Go to my website, theresalearlevine.com, find all the good stuff, listen to other episodes, what have you, and be in touch. I love hearing from you. I love knowing what resonated or what you have questions about or helping you figure out what to tap on next. So reach out. Theresa at theresalearlevine.com is my email address, and I will personally respond to you. And I look forward to hearing from you. And of course, if you're enjoying these episodes, I would absolutely love it if you would leave me a review and tell me what it is that you're enjoying or what you'd like to hear more of. Thanks again for listening and have an amazing day. Thanks so much for listening. If you loved this episode, please share it with a friend or post on social media and tag me so I can personally connect and thank you. Until next time, keep taking bold and brave action steps towards becoming more of who you want to be in this world. You are capable, you are worthy, and you are enough. Keep shining your light.